Hello, this is Dejon Hill. I'm here with Biology 2440 plasma membrane key terms, the concept map. So I'll just get straight to it. Looking at the left side, I used 2 pages. On the left hand side of my concept map, starting with the membrane models, they obviously demonstrate the appearance of a plasma membrane. There was the sandwich model, which shows proteins directly up against the phospholipid bilayer, and those proteins were also kind of layered looking. But then came the fluid mosaic model, which included transmembrane proteins in the whole image, as well as it did away with the protein layers since there wasn't basically enough proof to support that that's what it would look like. Then going back from the center of plasma membrane. Uh, we see that it's formed by the phospholipid bilayer, which is considered as amphipathic due to the hydrophobic tail and also the hydrophilic head of the phospholipid. So the fact that it has both of those parts makes it amphipathic. Looking at the hydrophobic tail of the phospholipid, it can either be a saturated fatty acid or it can be an unsaturated fatty acid. Excuse me. And then we also see that the hydrophobic tail of a phospholipid is the part of a phospholipid that goes inside like a dirt particle or anything like that whenever looking at a detergent molecule. And then there's the hydrophilic head of the phospholipid. Uh, the hydrophilic head makes up the outer portion of the phospholipid bilayer, while the hydrophobic tail makes up the inner part of the phospholipid bilayer. But back to the hydrophilic head, uh, it also forms the outside portion of those same detergent molecules. Then off to the right, we see that there are different membrane proteins. The plasma membrane contains glycoproteins, anchor membrane proteins, some transporter membrane proteins, receptor membrane proteins, enzyme membrane proteins, monolayer associated membrane proteins, meaning they only associate with one half of the phospholipid bilayer, lipid link membrane associated proteins, as the name says, linked to a lipid. There are integral membrane proteins and peripheral membrane proteins as well. Peripheral membrane proteins form a temporary bond or have a temporary relationship, so to speak, with the plasma membrane, and then the integral membrane proteins are there permanently. So then going back from the center, we see that selective permeability is an attribute of the plasma membrane, meaning that certain things can penetrate the plasma membrane um, given certain circumstances. In the event of passive transport, there's not necessarily any energy required for passive transport, and this usually occurs with substances traveling down the concentration gradient. Um, and it's also known as simple diffusion. Or simple diffusion is a form of passive transport, which is when there are no kind of channels used at all. It just passes whatever it is that gets through that membrane is just passing through with no channels or anything like that. Then there's also channel mediated passive transport, such as the ion channel, um, and even more specifically, a gated ion channel. In either of those situations, whatever substance is traveling through those channels is traveling down its electrochemical gradient. Um, and you can see off to the left of those, I wrote that those are types of membrane channels. Then going back to passive transport, we see when this occurs with water, that's called osmosis. In a hypertonic solution, you see water flowing out of the cell, and so in that case, then the cell will shrink. In an isotonic solution, there's an equal flow of water in and out, so whatever cell that's inside that solution is going to look the same. And then there's a hypotonic solution, which is when water flows into the cell, and at a certain point, then the cell will eventually burst. Then there's also, going back to selective permeability, active transport, which is uh, it requires energy in order to actively transport, which usually has molecules and ions traveling up their concentration gradient. So, in other words, they're going from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. And then also down at the bottom, I included the membrane molecules, which are the proteoglycans, glycolipids, and sterols slash steroids. So that was just a quick run through of my concept map there. Not quite as long as the first one, but that is basically it.